Hi, everybody. Welcome back. If I sound a little bit less energetic than normal, well, the title of this video may explain that. Yes, I messed up. Pretty big time. And I want to share this experience with all of you out there because, as always, this whole podcast and this channel is all about learning. And if that means learning from my own mistakes, then I want you to have the benefit of doing so. So this mistake that I'm going to be talking about, for some of you out there, you might be like, well, duh. Like, how could you not get that? And hopefully, for this to be productive, there's a lot of you out there who were like, oh, I would have done the same thing. I'm glad that you told me because I would have made the same mistake. At least I hope that's the case for at least some of you, and hopefully you haven't already made the mistake because that's the whole point of me putting this out there. So just to get to it, actually, before we get to it, just a quick reminder, please like and subscribe the video if you're here on YouTube, and follow the show if you're out there in podcast land. I really appreciate it. Okay, getting back to what the mistake was. This mistake is something that I swore to myself that I would never, ever, ever do. I would not be that guy. And yet here we are. This is in relation to instrument experience requirements for the instrument rating. Part 61, 65, Delta 2, double I. For those of you who don't know those regulations, this pertains to the long cross-country flight that you need to do for your instrument rating. And I'll read the regulation here. This is for aeronautical experience for the instrument airplane rating. A person who applies for an instrument airplane rating must have logged. I'm going to skip number 1, which just talks about the cross-country time and things like that. But number 2, 40 hours of actual or simulated instrument time. Okay, and it talks about 15 hours needing to be with an authorized instructor. The next, the single I talks about it being 3 hours of instrument flight training within the preceding 2 calendar months of the practical test, as is the case with most check rides. But it's the double I here that I am going to be referring to, which is instrument flight training on a cross-country flight, on cross-country flight procedures, including 1 cross-country flight in an airplane, with an authorized instructor that is performed under instrument flight rules when a flight plan has been filed with an air traffic control facility, and that involves a flight of 250 nautical miles along airways or by directed routing from an air traffic control facility. Okay, that's one condition. An instrument approach at each airport, and 3 different kinds of approaches with the use of navigation systems. Okay? So, to lay the scene for all of you out there, I messed this up in kind of the worst way. Well, I didn't mess it up in the worst way possible, but I found out that I messed it up in the worst way possible, which was by sending one of my students to a check ride, getting a call from the examiner that morning saying that there's a discrepancy in the experience requirements because based on what my student was displaying or showing for his cross-country, it did not meet the regulation. And at first, I was just completely confused. I figured it was just probably the way maybe he logged it or he was reading it, and it was just a misunderstanding because I'm sure that I did everything by the book. Like this is not the type of thing, if you know me, if you've ever flown with me, if you just even know me, you know this is not the type of thing I mess up. So I figured it was a misunderstanding, and I was getting in my logbook to take a look at what we did. And I'm going to tell you what we did. Let me pull it up here. We did this flight back in October, I believe. And the way we usually plan these flights, of course, we're starting from our home airport, Twin Oaks, 7 Sierra Tree. And I usually let my student choose the route, and then we, work on it together, or I make sure that it looks good. And the route that we did was going from Twin Oaks at 7 Sierra Tree to Hoquiam, then off to Shelton or Sanderson Field, and then finally we ended at, Tacoma Narrows. Okay? So this was Twin Oaks to Hoquiam, to Sanderson, to Tacoma Narrows. And then we flew back to Twin Oaks. And when we put this route in ForeFlight or SkyVector or whatever, it shows that the mileage that we obtained was 272.2 miles, okay? And it was a 4.5-hour flight. We did 3 different types of approaches. We did the VOR runway 6 approach. We did the RNAV runway 5 approach. We did the ILS 17 approach. Okay. Lots of good variety and experience for Wyatt, and I believe at the time these were 3 completely new airports for him. And this is one thing that was a contributing factor to this mistake, because one of the things I despise is when student pilots, whether they're a student pilot for real, like going out, pursuing their private certificate, or whether they're a commercial candidate, or in this case, an instrument candidate, I despise it when pilots go out for the purpose of these experience building flights. And they will fly just enough to meet the letter of the regulation. Okay, so let's just take the commercial long solo cross country as an example. That cross country requires pilots to fly a minimum of 250 miles away from the original point of departure, and the flight itself needs to be a total of at least 300 miles. So I'll see pilots that will leave their home airport. They'll fly to another airport that's maybe 251, okay, or something over 250 miles away, and then they'll come back. And that qualifies because they've landed someplace that's over 250 miles away, and then the return flight home obviously makes it over 500 miles, so the full flight is over 300. But this solo cross country requires them to also land at a total of 3 different airports. And so the part that I despise is, sure, they'll go over 250 miles away, land at maybe a new field to them. Hopefully it's a new airport for them. But then they'll fly all the way home. They'll land at maybe an airport that's just 5 minutes flight time away from their home field, do a touch and go, and then come back home. So they went all the way to a new airport, great, but then they came back to another airport that's 5 minutes from their home field, probably one they've landed at hundreds of times, and then they land back at their home field. And typically there are dozens of other airports along this route that they've never been to, and they just fly right over. I despise this because the whole point is to build experience. Why would you be making this long, expensive flight and not take the opportunity to gain new experience, as much new experience as possible? Land at 3 brand new airports. Yes, you have to come back home no matter what, but why not take the opportunity to land at as many airports as possible along your route? I don't get it. It's an expensive flight. Take advantage of it. So being in this mindset, and the same goes for the private cross country, okay, that one only needs to be a total of 150 miles, but being in this mindset, I hate it for the purpose of this instrument approach when people will just go out, they'll do an approach at maybe one or two new airports, and then come back and do an approach at their home airport. It's not building the experience. It's not, taking advantage of the dollars they're spending. So I always encourage and want my students to do new things on these flights. And that's why we try to go to not only 3 brand new airports that my students never been to. I try to make it new airports I've never even been to, although that's getting harder and harder. But 3 brand new airports they've never been to with 3 really different types of approaches, hopefully. Okay, that will challenge them and not just be the same approaches they fly at their local airports every single day. So that's been my mindset, and it still is my mindset. And typically it works out great. But here's the issue, and here is why throughout my, I went through the full 5 stages of grief. First denial, right? Then anger, okay? But eventually I came around to acceptance of this failure of mine, okay, that I did not properly meet this regulation for my student, and therefore he was not able to take his check ride that day. And there was one key phrase in the regulations that it came down to, and a unique circumstance around our home airport of Twin Oaks and how we did this flight. So this particular phrase is in the 6165 Delta 2 II Bravo, which states that there must be an instrument approach at each airport. Now, we did 3 instrument approaches at 3 different airports. Regulation doesn't even say it has to be 3 different airports. It could all be at one airport. But again, I want my student to have the experience. The problem came down to this. And again, this is for all you instrument students out there, and it's for all you cfi-is out there who are planning or helping your students plan these flights. Twin Oaks is an uncontrolled Class G airport with 0 instrument procedures. Okay, we don't have any instrument approaches, we don't have any instrument departures, nothing. Okay, we can't do instrument flying in or out of our, we can do instrument flying out of our airport. We can't fly an approach into Twin Oaks. Okay, so when we planned this flight, and we went to Hoquiam and we went to Sanderson, and then we went to Tacoma Narrows, the 250-mile requirement needed to be encompassed within that route, because Tacoma Narrows was the last airport that we did an instrument approach at. Coming all the way back to Twin Oaks, while it did exceed 250 miles, meant that Twin Oaks was one of the airports needed in order to qualify the trip as being over 250 miles. Because if I pull up SkyVector here, let me do this really quickly. If I pull up SkyVector and I just go departure from Twin Oaks to essentially Tacoma Narrows via the route of, we went to Newburgh via WAR, we went to the Itassi waypoint, we went to essentially Hoquiam, and then we essentially went to Sanderson, KSHN, I think, and then Tacoma. That's it. Yeah. All right. So with that routing, 7 Sierra Tree, Newburgh, Itassi waypoint, and then Hoquiam and Sanderson Field, then to Tacoma Narrows. That's only 175.9 miles. It doesn't meet the 250 that's required. So we came back to, Twin Oaks, which put it over the 250, but we didn't do an instrument approach into Twin Oaks. And therefore, we did not meet the requirement of doing an instrument approach at every airport. Again, I'm sure some of you out there are like saying, duh, how could you not know that? Well, I just told you how I could not know that. It never occurred to me that would, I mean, it makes sense. Don't get me wrong. And I was never, I'm not mad at the examiner. Never was. I was frustrated, of course, at the time with the situation and with myself. Okay, but he was right. The way the regulation's written, I would have needed to do, or my student specifically, would have needed to do an instrument approach at Twin Oaks to qualify that flight. Now, the quick workaround would have been that we fly an instrument approach into Hillsboro Airport, which is, again, our sister airport. That would have qualified. If we had done that flight into Hillsboro, so then if I add Hillsboro at the end of this route, essentially I'll add Tacoma Narrows as part of the route and then go direct Hillsboro. That would have been 280 miles. So that would have qualified if we had done that instrument approach in Hillsboro, because essentially for the purposes of the experience and the regulation, the flight would have terminated at Hillsboro. The flight from Hillsboro to Twin Oaks would have been unconsequential. It wouldn't have mattered, okay? Because we would have had met the requirement at Hillsboro. But again, being in that mindset that I don't like my students, I didn't even think about it because I don't like my students. We fly approaches at Hillsboro all the time. That's not something I want them to do on a flight about building experience. So the only time that I've flown an approach into Hillsboro with my students on this particular type of flight, this long cross country, is if it's been required. Because if the conditions are IFR or marginal VFR, then we'll often have to fly an approach into Hillsboro just to get below the cloud base and then get back to Twin Oaks VFR or sometimes special VFR. But that wasn't the case. So there was no reason in my mind to fly an approach into Hillsboro. Okay. So that was my mistake, guys. And as a result, over the past 2 days, I first went out with my student who couldn't do his check ride that day. We redid this flight. And of course, the consequences of this are he didn't get to do his check ride that day. So I wasted the time of the DPE. It also happened to be a day that the DPE was being evaluated by an FAA examiner. So I wasted that examiner's time. I wasted all their time. I had to rearrange my schedule to make this flight happen. And of course, I'm not going to charge my student for this flight. So I'm losing money on that. Not to mention I also cover half. I cover half the cost of the plane because I hate for them to have to pay for 4+ hours of plane rental to redo a flight. So they're losing more money. I mean, it's still great experience. Don't get me wrong. The student's getting great experience, but nonetheless, they're paying more money. I'm losing money. And not only did I have to do it with him, but, and going back through other students, because this past year, I've been working with 5 instrument students consistently. So I had to go through and make sure that all my instrument students who I've done all these cross countries with qualified. I was fortunate that most of them actually did qualify, but there was one other that didn't, and he's getting ready to take his check ride. So yesterday we went out and redid his cross country as well. Another flight that's costing money and time and lots of things. So bottom line is I wanted to share this experience for all of you out there who might be in a similar situation as we are, where your home airport doesn't have a instrument approach, and therefore you're not flying one to get back into your airport. You need to make sure that the full 250 miles of the flight is encompassed within the airport or airports that you're doing instrument approaches at. Okay? I hate to see anybody go through this, and of course, I'm never going to let this happen again. But there you have it, folks. I mean, this is something I said I would never allow a student to be disqualified from even starting a check ride because of an error I made in either paperwork or lack of properly determining their eligibility. And yet, here I am, and I did. And it should also be noted that the other reason why I never thought anything of it is because I've sent students to check rides previously who had similar types of cross countries, and yet no one ever said anything. They went through, and I guess they were lucky that it was overlooked. But that was another reason why I never thought anything about it. It just had never been brought up. And I am very thankful to this examiner and to the FAA examiner that he was with, and they were working together because, they never want to have to disqualify someone from a check ride. So they were working together trying to see, is there any way to make this work? Does it qualify? Like, how can we look, are there any other flights that qualify that we could make substitute? But unfortunately, there weren't. So as hard of a decision as it was to say, I'm sorry, you don't qualify for this check ride to my student, and of course tell me that, I'm very grateful that they did, because now I know. And of course, in hindsight, I look back and I'm like, yeah, I mean, the regulation makes sense. I don't understand why I never just put it together. I don't know. But I'm very thankful to them for bringing it up and pointing it out to me so that I don't make this mistake in the future. Anyway, I hope this video has been helpful for all of you out there. Please don't make the same mistake I made. And when you do make mistakes, understand that, hey, it happens to all of us. And I encourage you to share your mistakes with others, as I am doing now, so that we all can learn from each other and hopefully not repeat the same mistakes as others. Sometimes you only get one chance at a certain mistake, and the only way to learn it is from others. So let's be safe out there. Let's be methodical. Let's be thorough. Okay? And thank you so much for spending time with me today, everybody. We will see you next time on Centerline.